Let's continue our OHL history series where we look at the OHL season by season. And we've had some historic runs by teams up until this point since the OHL came under their banner back in the 80-81 season. And this season, 87-88, no different. And we'll get to that as it's in the playoffs where we experience that history. But going into this year, this is their 8th season playing with 15 teams, and it's a 66-game schedule. Now, what's new this season is that there's a new award. This time, the OHL honoring the goaltender of the year. Kind of surprised it took this long for an award to officially be set aside for the top goaltender in the league, but had to wait until 87-88. Now, looking at the regular season standings, let's start in the M's division because the Windsor Compuware Spitfires, they had a solid run. 50-14-2 is their record, 102 points. So a 50-win season is quite the accomplishment there, as that's the Spitfires who did that run. Second in the division, the London Knights. 40-22-4 was their record for 84 points. Third were the Hamilton Steelhawks with a record of 35-28-3, 73 points to their credit. The North Bay Centennials, after going to the OHL final the year prior, they're now fourth with a record of 31-30-5, 67 points. The Sioux Greyhounds would come in fifth with a record of 32-33-1, 65 points. And claiming the final playoff spot in the M's division would be the Kitchener Rangers with a record of 26-39-1 for 53 points. On the outside looking in for the playoff picture, the Guelph Platers, they would finish 7th, 21-40-5 was their record for 47 points. And once again at the bottom of the division, the Sudbury Wolves, 17-48-1 is their record for 35 points. Shifting over to the Leyden division, the Peterborough Petes would take the top spot. They had a record of 44-17-5, good for 93 points. Second, Ottawa, the 67s, had a record of 38-26-2 for 78 points. The Cornwall Royals would take the third spot with 35-24-7. Their record was 77 points. The Belleville Bulls, they finished fourth, 32-30-4 with 68 points. The Oshawa Generals, after winning the 87 OHL championship, this year they would finish fifth with a record of 32-31-3 for 67 points. And claiming the final playoff spot in the Leyden would be the Toronto Marlboros with a record of 26-39-1 for 53 points. And this season, it was the Kingston Canadians who had finished seventh and outside the playoff picture with a record of 14-52, 28 points. And it was a rough season for the Canadians as they suffered a 28-game losing streak during the regular season. And then they were sold at the end. So the Kingston Canadians run, it was hit and miss. There were some stretches where they would miss consecutive years from the playoffs. And then remember back in the 80-81 season, they were in the conference or in the division final, but would fall short. So after a pretty rough season in 1987-88, this would be a transition. They would no longer be the Kingston Canadians after this year, as they would shift to the Kingston Raiders. So we'll talk more about that in the 88-89 video, but we're just going to focus on 87-88. Now, it was the opposite for the Compuware Spitfires, who won 35 of their final 36 games. This Windsor team, unstoppable really in the second half of the season, and they were the first team to go undefeated in the OHL playoffs. And I'll show you that in the playoff tree in just a few minutes of how the Spitfires managed to plow their way through the OHL playoffs. And things not so great in Hamilton with the Steelhawks. This would actually be their final season before they relocated, and it was because of lack of fan support. Remember, they were playing out of Copps Coliseum in downtown Hamilton, the brand new arena intended for the National Hockey League, but for the junior hockey team, the Steelhawks, they were struggling, and they were there for 4 seasons and would prepare for a move to Niagara Falls. So just up the QEW is where the Hamilton Steelhawks would go after this season. So we've had some stability in the OHL for the last few years, but now some shaky ground right now at the end of the 1980s for the Ontario Hockey League. Before we look at the playoff tree, let's look at the top scorers from the 87-88 season. Andrew Castles, the Ottawa 67s, he led the way, 48 goals, 103 assists, unreal, 151 points to lead the way. Andrew Castles, of course, would go on to play in the National Hockey League and have a pretty successful career there. Second in scoring that season, Len Sacchio of the North Bay Centennials, 53 goals, 82 assists, 135 points. Kelly Kane of the Windsor Spitfires was third with 57 goals, 76 assists, 133 points. Sean Williams of the Oshawa Generals had 58 goals, 65 assists, 123 points. Dan Robotham of the Ottawa 67s, 43 goals, 79 assists, 122 points. Stan Drulia of the Hamilton Steelhawks is next, 52 goals, 69 assists, 121 points. Ron Goodall, he would split time between the Kitchener Rangers and the London Knights, 63 goals, 56 assists, 119 points. What a season it was for Goodall. And I know that the Rangers and Knights have a good rivalry now, but I would imagine that must have been a tough move for fans of the Kitchener Rangers, seeing Goodall shipped off to the London Knights that season. And then eighth in scoring, Larry Mitchell, the Cornwall Royals, 49 goals, 66 assists, 115 points. Mike Wolak of the Windsor Spitfires was ninth, 42 goals, 72 assists, 114 points. And then Dan Curry of the Sioux Greyhounds, 10th in scoring, 50 goals, 59 assists, 109 points. Now, going into the playoffs, it is a best-of-7 series. There are no byes in the division quarterfinal, so everybody, the top six in each division, played. And let's start off with the Leyden division, where the Peterborough Petes swept the Toronto Marlboros 4-0. The Cornwall Royals, they needed 6 games to get past the Belleville Bulls, 4-2. The Ottawa 67s needed 7 games to take out the Oshawa Generals, 4-3. Over in the Ems division, the Windsor Spitfires, no problems with the Kitchener Rangers completing the series sweep. The Hamilton Steelhawks, they would sweep the North Bay Centennials. And then the London Knights taking out the Sioux Greyhounds in 6 games. In the quarterfinal, the Peterborough Petes and Windsor Spitfires would both get byes, so that would leave 2 matchups. First, in the Leyden, it would be the Ottawa 67s taking out Cornwall in 5 games. And then in the Ems division, the Hamilton Steelhawks upsetting the London Knights 4-2. So that would set us up for the semifinal, and that would feature Peterborough against Ottawa. Classic rivalry. But it didn't last long, as the Peterborough Petes would complete the series sweep of the 67s. And then in the Ems division, the Windsor Spitfires, they would claim a 4-game sweep over the Hamilton Steelhawks. So in the final for the J Ross Robertson Cup, Peterborough Petes against the Windsor Compuware Spitfires, and the Spitfires completing the run, sweeping the Petes 4-0. So the Spitfires, a perfect 12-0 in the 1988 playoffs. And in that final between the Spitfires and the Petes, it was really no contest. 7-4 would be your score in game 1, 5-3 in game 2, 5-3 again in game 3, before the Spitfires would win it 5-2 in game 4 in the deciding match. Now, going into the Memorial Cup, it was being held in Chicoutimi, and it was held at the George Vesna Center in Chicoutimi, but the Saguenayens, they were not a participant as they didn't go far enough in the QMJHL playoffs. That was the ruling by the Canadian Hockey League that season. So the Q, represented by the Hull Olympique, who won the league championship, and the runner-up, the Drummondville Voltigeurs. So Chicoutimi supposed to be the host, but the ruling was they didn't go far enough, which would be interesting nowadays, considering we've had Memorial Cups where the host would be knocked out in the first round of the playoffs. So, like I said, the 1980s, we've been seeing different formats for the Memorial Cup, and now we're seeing different rules when it comes to hosting duties, and we're not done with that yet, as we've got a Memorial Cup coming up in a few episodes from now, where the host wouldn't be invited because they didn't even make the playoffs. So we'll get to that at that time. But the 1988 Memorial Cup final, the WHL was represented by the Medicine Hat Tigers and, of course, the Spitfires from the OHL. The Spitfires, they would finish first in the round robin, but just like Oshawa in the Memorial Cup the year prior in 87, they'd lose to the Medicine Hat Tigers 7-6 in the final game. No defense in that series or in that final game of the Memorial Cup as they went back and forth, but the Spitfires falling just short against the Medicine Hat Tigers for the CHL Memorial Cup. Some of the award winners from that season, the Red Tilson and Eddie Powers, both going to Andrew Castles of the Ottawa 67s. No real surprise there. Well, the Matt Layden went to Dick Todd of the Peterborough Petes. Sean Williams won the Jim Hahn Memorial Trophy. The Max Kaminsky Trophy went to Daryl Shannon of the Windsor Spitfires. Daryl Shannon, just a side note, I got to do some broadcasts with him on Rogers TV. He was my color guy when we did some Alliston Hornets games because he was the coach of the Hornets and then would step up into the broadcast booth when he wasn't coach. So it's kind of cool seeing Shannon's name here in the awards category. And then the very first OHL goaltender of the year was Rick Tabaracci of the Cornwall Royals. So there's a name I haven't heard in quite a while. The Jack Ferguson that season went to Drake Barahowski of the Kingston Raiders. So Barahowski would be the first overall pick in the 1988 OHL priority selection. And then the Ems Family Award went to Rick Corvo of the London Knights. So just a few of the trophy winners from that season, as it is fun to see some of the names that we don't hear much of anymore right now. But still, what a season it was in 1987-88 for the Windsor Compuware Spitfires, going a perfect 12-0 to win the J Ross Robertson Cup. Just too bad they couldn't also win the Memorial Cup just to complete that trifecta. So if you're a fan of the Spitfires or if you're a fan of the OHL during the 87-88 season, and if there's something you'd like to add to the history, you can put that in the comments below. As this is kind of just a summary of what happened that year. And it's just fun just going through all the seasons as we go through the summer of 2025 and preparing for the upcoming OHL season for 25-26. So thank you very much for your support. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe, and we'll talk to you again soon.